I mean, if he wants me to put a contract down, I will. But it's like Bellew. You know, sometimes you have a stronger relationship with people that aren't under contract. You know? So I've never presented Dillian Whyte with a contract because we've got a good relationship.
Do you know what he's actually doing in Las Vegas?
Yeah, he's probably going out there. He's been invited out there probably by Showtime. He's just done a fight on Showtime. They've probably invited him out there. There's a few people trying to court him, tickle his balls a little bit. He's probably liking it, actually. But, you know, like I said, I think we've done a great job. He's got to number 1 in the WBC. He's got to number 1 in the WBO, mainly because of his wins. But I've made him millions of pounds on pay-per-views. But it's not, you know, at the moment, the conflict will be, we're trying to deliver him the Anthony Joshua fight. If he doesn't feel like the terms are right, he may get the ump. If he gets the ump, he may want to fuck me off. If he fucks me off, I'll go to sleep. I sleep 9 hours.
Welcome back to Keep It Real Boxing. This is Cypher Box. Okay, so Dillian Whyte this weekend was out in Las Vegas. He was ringside for Manny Pacquiao versus Adrian Broner. He did some interviews in the lead up to that, though, where he had stated that he was out there to have talks with PBC. Now, PBC comped him those tickets at ringside, but it was interesting to hear that Dillian Whyte is keeping his options open. He also revealed something that most people didn't know. I did know because I did a few videos last year where I quickly mentioned what I'm about to tell you about Dillian Whyte, which is that he is a free agent. All right, that his business dealings with Matchroom and Eddie Hearn have always been on the basis of a fight-to-fight contract, not on a fight contract in terms of like a long-term fight contract, like a 3-fight, 4-fight, 5-fight deal, or anything like that, which means he's free to talk to anyone he wants, to work with anyone he wants, because he's not tied down to Matchroom or Eddie Hearn. Now, of course, you have heard, as I have recently, you know, he's done enough interviews of it, about it, that Dillian Whyte isn't happy with the initial offer made by Eddie Hearn, Matchroom and Anthony Joshua to fight Anthony Joshua on April 13th in Wembley. He said he labelled the offer ridiculous. He said it was lower, or less, should I say, than what he made against Derek Chisora recently. And he said it was ridiculous. And obviously he turned down the offer. Eddie Hearn has come back and said that they will make another offer to Dillian Whyte. He's made it out like the offer wasn't that bad. But according to Eddie Hearn, they are going to make another offer to Dillian Whyte. I'm guessing sometime this week we'll hear about that. Now, in this video, I'm kind of going to give my opinion from an outsider looking in terms of how does Dillian Whyte benefit, you know, perhaps moving over to PBC and working with Haymon and his team instead of Eddie Hearn. But on the flip side also, you know, does it benefit him to stay with Eddie Hearn and Matchroom Boxing and continue his business with them? So let's start with PBC. Okay, so the one most obvious thing is for Dillian Whyte, if he was to, you know, start working with PBC, would be the US exposure he gets. Okay, you know, he talked about in his interviews this weekend where he says that, in order to make it big, in order to create a real legacy for myself, you need to fight in the US. Yeah, and I've said this before, you know, the US is the biggest consumer market in the world, right? But every British boxer throughout, you know, the sports history has always had to cross the pond and try and make their name out there. You know, we've seen many of them try and do it. Some have been more successful than others, but it's something that is required in my opinion. Yeah. All right. If you're going to be a world champion, he says, if you want to be a great world champion, then you have to go and fight in other places. And I agree with Dillian Whyte on that one. And he will get that exposure out there in the US. You know, under PBC, you know, Haymon has a stable of 160 fighters under him. He's extended his deal with Showtime, I believe, by 3 years. He's got a 3-year deal, I believe it is, with Fox, out there in the US. You know, and I think they're paying out 160 mil, 170 mil, something like that. You know, that's what the deal's worth. He's got Fox pay-per-view, Showtime pay-per-view out there as well, if they can create big enough fights for him out there. In terms of paydays, well, one thing's for sure, you know, he's not going to have those problems with Haymon. Haymon pays his fighters very well. Okay, I've never ever heard a PBC fighter complaining about how much they're getting paid. Not only that, I've never heard PBC fighters complaining about their purse splits. So if, for example, Keith Thurman versus Danny Garcia, or Thurman versus Porter, or Porter versus Garcia, you know, I've never heard them coming out saying, no, I've turned down an offer to fight Danny because the purse split wasn't correct, or anything like that, or Errol Spence Jr., you know, no one ever seems to complain on PBC about how much money they're making. All the fighters seem to be very happy in terms of the money they make, and they're very loyal to Al Haymon because of this reason. So is he going to be looked after financially in terms of money? You know, and, you know, paydays and the money he's going to make from fighting under PBC, I think he'll be well looked after. I think, you know, Al Haymon and PBC have a track record of doing that. Potential opponents for Dillian Whyte in terms of, you know, fighters, other heavyweights, top heavyweights on PBC. So the obvious one is obviously Deontay Wilder, WBC world champion. You've got Dominic Breazeale, who's the WBC heavyweight mandatory to Wilder's belt. You've got Luis Ortiz. You could say Joe Joyce as well, but Joe Joyce probably isn't a big enough name, and that's a fight that Dillian probably wouldn't take. But the likelihood is that if a fight with Anthony Joshua could not materialise, the best option next for Dillian Whyte would be to secure himself in another mandatory position, and that would be for the WBC belt. And the way to do that is to take on that fight against Dominic Breazeale. Right, Dominic Breazeale has, you know, he's shouted it out and said that he's got no problem coming to the UK and fighting Dillian here in the UK. You know, even if the fight happens in the US, whichever, right? I'm sure Dillian, you know, probably want that fight at home. But if he had to fight him in the US and he wants that US exposure, then there's an option for him. And not only that, you know, kind of, if the fight with AJ is not going to happen, obviously he's not going to get a fight straight away with Deontay Wilder, because Deontay Wilder's in negotiations with Tyson Fury. Deontay Wilder was recently interviewed ringside for, you know, at Pacquiao Brona, and said that he thought it was a good idea for Dillian to come over and join PBC and Al Haymon too. Maybe if he can fight Breazeale in the meantime, you know, maybe that fight's easier to make with Deontay Wilder if he's on PBC rather than with Eddie Hearn, because we know Deontay Wilder has obviously a massive issue with Eddie Hearn. He doesn't trust the guy, and, you know, really, you know, is against working with him to a degree. You know, he keeps saying it over and over again. He doesn't trust him at all. So maybe that's a better option for Dillian Whyte. If he was working with PBC and Al Haymon, he can make that fight with, if he was to beat Dominic Breazeale, he could probably make that fight with Deontay Wilder. You know, it would be probably a lot easier for him to make that fight, is what I'm trying to say. Don't forget, there's Luis Ortiz there as well. Dillian says that he's tried to make the fights with Luis Ortiz, but Luis Ortiz hasn't been playing ball, according to Dillian Whyte. But again, does that fight, you know, is that fight easier to make if Al Haymon and PBC are making that fight, or negotiating that fight between the two fighters? I don't know. But again, that's another option that's there for him as well. So what about here in the UK? You know, Dillian Whyte has worked really hard to propel himself to the forefront of boxing here in the UK. You know, his last two fights were pay-per-views. He's now seen as a UK pay-per-view star. So if joining PBC, how does that help him here in the UK? Well, as you all know, Al Haymon and PBC have signed a 3-year deal with ITV to show 15 fight cards a year. Let's not forget, ITV have their own pay-per-view platform with their channel ITV Box Office. So he'll still get that pay-per-view exposure that he needs out here, that he wants out here. You know, so there's no worry of him losing that. You know what I mean? He could still be a pay-per-view star out here in the UK. His fights can still be shown on pay-per-view, providing the opponent's the right person to be pushing it on pay-per-view. So he's not going to lose anything here in the UK, to be honest with you. He can still get loads of exposure like he has been on Sky Sports. So all in all, you know, it sounds pretty good. You know, joining PBC, you know, there's a lot of options there. There's a lot of potential there for Dillian Whyte. You know, I'm guessing he will keep himself as a free agent, though. I don't think he will tie himself down to a contract. You know, PBC does have other fighters who work that way. Mikey Garcia is one of them. I don't believe he has a contract with PBC. He has a fight-to-fight contract, business dealings with Al Haymon and PBC, kind of like exactly how Dillian does with Eddie Hearn. The only downside for Dillian was that, if it could just create further problems, in terms of making a fight with AJ. But if he keeps himself as a free agent, he could just step away from PBC and go and deal with Eddie Hearn. But that could still present problems if Eddie Hearn decides, to be difficult with the negotiations. So, other than that, it seems like, it would be a good move for Dillian Whyte. So what about staying on with Eddie Hearn and Matchroom Boxing? Well, you know what? His success will probably just keep continuing and growing the way it has, to be honest with you. He's still got that big platform with Sky Sports and Sky Sports box office. He's made a lot of money from Eddie Hearn and Matchroom Boxing by working with those guys and Sky Sports. So I can imagine his money would just continue to grow, providing he gets the right fights. Dillian himself has said that, he's got no issues with Eddie Hearn. He's done good business with Eddie Hearn and made a lot of money with Eddie Hearn. So the relationship isn't damaged. I just think, Dillian's probably, with the recent offer made to fight AJ, he's keeping his options open. But don't forget, Dillian has also been quite vocal in saying that Anthony Joshua is going to fight Jermall next in the US. 100% is what he has said. Now, we don't know that for sure. It looks like that, don't get me wrong. But if they make another offer which isn't satisfactory to Dillian Whyte in terms of what he expects, then you can see it going that way. And I'm guessing this is what I mean by Dillian Whyte's keeping his options open, because he thinks, well, under Hearn, who else can I get a fight with? Maybe I need to join with PBC and do some business with PBC to get those fights with their heavyweights out there in the US and get that exposure at the same time while I can in the US. So if Dillian Whyte chose to continue with Eddie Hearn, Matchroom Boxing and Sky Sports, who would be his potential opponents if the AJ deal falls through? Okay, there's a couple of names I could think of that came to mind in terms of, managers and promoters and fighters that Eddie Hearn, potentially does good business with. One name you could probably throw out there is Povetkin, but personally, I don't really rate Povetkin. I know everyone hyped up Povetkin before the Joshua fight, but I don't rate Povetkin at all, to be honest with you. Yeah, I think, if you go and watch my Fight Night rewind of AJ versus Povetkin, I think Joshua, made that a more difficult fight than it needed to be. He should have probably got him out of there in 3 or 4 rounds, but he used those wrong tactics and strategies, in my opinion. And I broke it down quite well. So definitely not a Povetkin, in my opinion. Rematch with Joseph Parker, perhaps. We know Eddie Hearn does do good business with Duco Entertainment and David Higgins. So, Parker, it was a close fight. It ended up being a close fight last time. A thoroughly entertaining fight, as well on top of that. And, does Joseph Parker deserve a rematch? Probably. Does he want it? He has stated he wants it. So, does he get a rematch with Joseph Parker? The fights with Luis Ortiz, can that be made while he's under Eddie Hearn? I don't think so. I think it'd be a lot easier if he was with Al Haymon and PBC, and definitely the fight with Deontay Wilder later on down the line if he wanted that fight. Again, I don't know whether that fight can be made, or even the Dominic Brazil fight. I think it will all be easier if he joined PBC. So, there was another name that was also thrown out there, Vladimir Klitschko. So apparently rumours are that Vladimir Klitschko is looking to make a bit of a comeback. Rumours are that he's in talks with DAZN about a 3-fight deal. One of those fights, which would be his first one, which would be a tune-up. The other opponents that were named were a rematch with Tyson Fury and a rematch with Anthony Joshua. No mention of any other names like Luis Ortiz or Dillian Whyte or Deontay Wilder. Really strange though as well, because, in my opinion, I've proved it in the past, in my videos in the past, that Vladimir Klitschko didn't want anything to do with Deontay Wilder. I find it really weird that he's come out after, God knows how many years now being in retirement after that AJ fight. And, he's, you think, hey, man, maybe I'll go and have a pop at Deontay Wilder, right? And then take on Anthony Joshua and, take my, regain my place on the throne of the heavyweight division. But that's what the rumours are. He wants a 3-fight deal with DAZN, a tune-up fight, a rematch with Tyson Fury, and then a rematch with Anthony Joshua. No mention of Dillian Whyte. Dillian Whyte is quite convinced that Klitschko will be returning. That, you know, the article that came out last week where Klitschko denied that he would be returning and coming out of retirement was false. He says, you know what, Klitschko is definitely coming back. He's a smart businessman. He knows what he's doing, etc., etc. Personally, I think Klitschko should stay retired and stay out of the picture altogether. You know, I just, you know what? Over the years, I just haven't found Klitschko that entertaining. You know, he's probably, give credit, his most entertaining fight came against Anthony Joshua. But, you know, how old is he now? Like, he was 40 when he fought Joshua, right? He's what, probably 42, 43, whatever it is now. You know, I mean, age catches up to everyone sooner or later. Yeah, a lot of people might say the rest may help him, but I don't know. You know what? I think he should just stay out of the way, stay out of the picture, and let these young guns handle their business. You know what I mean? Like, you know, you've got Tyson, you've got AJ, you've got Whyte, you've got Deontay Wilder. You know, there's fighters outside of that. You know, the heavyweight division isn't deep in terms of the talent pool, in terms of the top elite level fighters. But then you've got contenders like Joseph Parker, Jarrell Miller, Dominic Breazeale's in a mandatory position for the WBC belt. You know, maybe you need to just stay out of the way and let these young guns get on with it. Who knows, you know, but that's just my personal opinion. You know, I'm not really too thrilled or excited at the idea of Klitschko returning to the ring, because let's face it, he's getting old, yeah? Look, personally, I think, you know, it wouldn't be a bad move to go over to PBC and Al Haymon for Dillian Whyte and start working with them. I think, you know what, there's some fighters over there in the US that, you know, would be, you know, great matchups for Dillian Whyte. You know, there's potentially he can maneuver himself into a better position to face Deontay Wilder. Maybe it makes it easier to make that fight with Deontay Wilder at some point. A lot of people are saying, well, yeah, you know, he's not going to fight Luis Ortiz for that second mandatory position. Yeah, fine, I get that. He could fight Dominic Breazeale for the first mandatory position, though, for Wilder's WBC belt. You know, I mean, we know Wilder and Fury are probably going to end up fighting. If AJ is going to fight Jarrell Miller, he's not going to get a shot against AJ either. So, you know, all his complaints, you know, a year ago, where they're saying, oh, we're not willing to wait 2 years. Well, you have technically, you know, it's what, 2019 now? All that talk started in 2017, saying that we're not going to wait 2 years for a shot at the WBC belt. You know, he's now in the position as, what, the mandatory challenger for the WBO? And is he, you know, have they called that? Have they ordered it? No. You know, on top of that, is AJ willing to fight Dillian Whyte at the moment? We don't know yet. You know, he's given him a low ball offer. This is the beginning part of the negotiations with Dillian Whyte and Anthony Joshua. Another offer's on its way, says Eddie. Dillian Whyte may not be pleased with that. You know, I think, you know what, forget it. I'm done negotiating with you guys. I'll go to PBC and try and make a fight there with Breazeale and put myself in another position for a mandatory position, you know, but for Deontay Wilder's WBC belt. And then wait for Tyson Fury and Wilder to have their rematch and then fight the winner of that. You know, again, you know, PBC are not going to have a problem dealing with Frank Warren and BT Sports for a fight with Tyson Fury. So, do you know what I mean? There's plenty of options there. That's what I'm saying. It looks good for Dillian Whyte. You know, if he keeps himself as a free agent, you know, which is a smart move from Dillian Whyte, I have to admit. You know, I've always said that that's a smart move. I think more fighters should kind of take note in terms of how he handles his business. He doesn't tie himself down to a contract. You know, he's learnt the business. He says that himself. You know, you've got to give him credit for that. And you can learn a lot from that. You know, and he's in a better position, so he can move around and make fights anywhere with any broadcaster, any promoter, any manager, etc. he wants, because he's not tied down to anything. And, you know, sometimes I think more fighters need to do that. But look, like I said, the options are limitless. He has great options either on the PBC side, and he has some good options still with Eddie Hearn as well. But we'll have to wait and see how it all pans out. Let me know what you think of course, guys. That's just my point of view as an outsider looking in. Love to hear what you guys think about Dillian Whyte potentially moving over to PBC, or if you think he should stay with Eddie Hearn and Matchroom Boxing. Let's not forget as well, just one more thing I want to throw out there, is that this could be a negotiation tactic for Dillian Whyte as well. Let's not forget that. Yeah, Dillian Whyte, you know, he could be going, oh, I'll come and talk to you over there, Al, and PBC, and then putting it out through the media, you know, maybe trying to make Eddie Hearn sweat a little bit, thinking like, oh, God, I don't want to lose at Dillian. You know, Dillian does good pay-per-view numbers here in the UK. You know, I could potentially make that fight with him and AJ at some point. If not next, then we can do it down the line. Do you get what I'm trying to say? So he's trying to maneuver himself in a position, Dillian Whyte, where, you know, he makes Eddie Hearn worry a little bit. And Eddie Hearn, you know, hey, look, this is the deal I'm going to give you. Just stay with me and keep working with me on this side. This is the money we're going to offer you to fight AJ. It's a really good deal. Basically, to get himself a better deal. You never know, it could be a negotiation tactic. But like I said, plenty of options for Dillian Whyte. Let me know what you think. You know, like I said, do you think it's a good idea for him to go to PBC or to stay with Eddie Hearn? You've heard my views. Love to hear yours. All right, guys, as always, like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, this is Cypherbox reminding you to keep it real.